So who's your daddy? Nah, that didn't quite come out right. Has a little bit of an incorrect inflection. Doesn't quite sound like how I wanted to sound. But what I want to talk about today is a concept of virtual parents. So I've been thinking through ideas. Ideas of how to feed myself in this modern world of plague and upcoming depression. There's nothing quite like a plague and an upcoming global depression to really focus the mind and say, "Hey, you know what? I should probably stop screwing around so much." Hey, I've been having a lot of fun for the last few years. I've been making a couple of dollars, but I've really been just screwing around a lot. But with the plague and the upcoming global depression, maybe I should get my act in gear. Maybe I should stop screwing around quite so much. I know it may sound weird. I mean, I've been doing a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. I've been doing a lot of work, but it's been like, I don't know, like the work that just interests me. Again, an important thing to understand: you can do work that doesn't necessarily pay the most money. You are still working, but sometimes you got to focus on the pay. And so, anyways, I've been sitting back and I've been thinking about what I could do, lots of different ideas. And one of the things I think I'm focusing in on is the concept of virtual parents. Now, this probably sounds a little bit weird. Again, in the modern world, right? Being naked in the age of a new day. You have to think about what the modern world actually is. Not about the world as it was when I was born in the 70s, not about the world as it was when I was growing up in the 80s, when I was a young adult in the 90s, and then as I went into the adulthoods over the past 20 years. But think about the world as it is today, in the dawn of a new age. How does this age look versus the previous ages, right? There were in previous time periods, there were things that people need. There were problems that people had in the previous time periods that now in this modern day aren't necessarily the same problems that people have. And again, when problems change, that's opportunities. Because again, how we become important in life, how we make money in life, is by solving people's problems. So if you're still trying to solve the problems of the 1980s in 2020, you're probably going to be running into some issues. So I've been thinking about this. Again, I've been doing content creation for almost 11 years now. I've been talking to my viewer base since 2012, whatever that is, eight and a half years at this point. And I've been thinking about, what do people actually need? And again, when we talk about industry expertise, an important concept of industry expertise is actually interacting with people and seeing what they really do in fact need. And many times what people really do in fact need aren't the things you would normally think about. Like, on the face of them, they kind of seem absurd. Like, when you first look at it, right? Especially as an older person, when you look at younger people's modern problems, initially they seem absurd on the face of them. Not only do the problems seem absurd, but the people having the problems almost seem absurd, because the problem seems so absurd that you sit there and you go, wait a minute, if you're having that type of problem, oh, what the hell is wrong with you? But the issue may not be what is wrong with them. The issue may be that the world has moved on. The world has changed. In this new age, the problems that people are having are different than what we used to have, right? So again, back in the old days, back for me in the 80s or 90s, again, as a young adult, one of the big problems was access to education, access to knowledge, right? So if you go back to the 1980s, when I was a kid, right, we had Walden Books and Crown Bookstore, right? So basically, a Walden Books was literally smaller than my basement. A Walden Books or a Crown Bookstore was literally smaller than my basement. And so if you went to one of these bookstores to buy a book, they would literally only have, bestsellers. They would have like the bestseller books and like the most popular of the old literature, if you wanted War and Peace, you could always find yourself a copy of War and Peace. So that you could put it on your shelf and then not read it, right? But there were specific books. Like if you wanted to go and you wanted to buy a book or something, there were specific books. Like back when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I read the Forgotten Realms series of Dungeons and Dragons books. And one of the big problems was many times I had to read trilogies in the incorrect order, simply because it was so hard to get my hands on the books in the trilogies. Like sometimes you'd read the end, and then you'd read the beginning, and then you'd read the middle, simply because you would go to this Walden Books and they would have the end. And then a couple weeks later, you go to this Crown Books and they'd have the beginning, right? Like finding books, finding materials was so difficult. Again, like when you think about telecourses for my generation. So telecourses were these VCR tapes. VCR tape. Oh my God, if you think modern online education sucks, which it does, to be clear, most of it sucks. Oh my God, you're talking about back in the old days, right? Back in the old days, in the 1990s, you would have to go to a community college or possibly go to a library. You would check out these VCR tapes. You would plug these VCR tapes into your TV, and then you would sit there for the next hour trying not to fall asleep, as essentially, like you would literally, I mean, again, and think about this. This is before YouTube. This is before selfies and all this kind of thing. So people weren't used to talking to cameras. Like nobody was used to even thinking about a camera. So imagine a professor who still thinks a VCR tape is a newfangled piece of technology, and they are now talking into a big old camcorder trying to give a lecture. And then you're watching this after it's already been seen by about 1,000 times. So there's lines going through and the sound is awful. It was so horrible. Again, so one of the things, like, so for me, in my age, I guess you would say, in my age, like one of the big problems was access to knowledge. Access to knowledge was very difficult. Again, getting access to books, getting access to people who are in the field, getting access to all this material was just incredibly difficult. I mean, again, for any of the technology professionals out there, what you have to understand is back in like 2000, right, there used to be this thing called TechNet. I think TechNet still exists, but it's different. And basically with TechNet from Microsoft, one of the things that you got with it was all of their white papers and their documentations. Now imagine this for a second. Imagine being a technology professional actually trying to keep up with technology, and literally, Microsoft would send you this stack of CDs. One of these CDs would be the index for all of the other CDs, right? So if you're sitting there and you're like, I'm trying to figure out how to implement routing with my NT 4.0 server, you would put in the index CD. You would type in routing Windows NT4 server, and then it would tell you all the different CDs in this pile that had white pages talking about Windows NT 4.0 and routing. Hopefully, if the index was worth a damn, which sometimes it wasn't. And then you would have to pull out that particular CD. You'd have to put that in, and then you'd have to read a white paper. Not a video, not a podcast, not somebody trying to have a conversation with you about the subject. Oh no, you got to read a white paper on Windows NT 4.0 routing. Oh, fun times, right? So again, the problem for my age was access to information, access to knowledge. Again, if you go back to 2009 when I started creating educational content, right? The point of creating educational content is, look, I'm a professional. I've done this. I've had a business with employees. This is how you do network cabling. This is how you trace network lines. This is how you do backup. This is how you do data recovery. This is how, here's all the material. Here's all the knowledge I wish I had 10 years ago. Here, I'm giving it to you in a streaming format, right? And so again, the problem of my age has been access to knowledge. But time has moved on. The world has moved on. And so when you start looking at the modern world, you start looking at the modern young people, right? They have access to all this knowledge. They have access to everything on YouTube, and for pennies, they can pay for Udemy or Pluralsight or just, I mean, there's all this knowledge. Again, I mean, you can get like a PhD level education, whether or not you get the certificate. You can get a PhD level education basically sitting at home in the mountaintops, as long as you have a 10 megabit per second internet connection. All of this knowledge is there. And so one of my one of my frustrations is when I talk with people, especially with the young people, it's like, look, all of this knowledge is here. So all you have to do is you have to learn this knowledge. You have to go out and talk with people. You have to figure out what knowledge you've learned is valuable to these people and what knowledge they wish you had. And then you keep going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And at some point you have a career, right? Again, if you want to be a technology professional, go out and talk to people in the tech field or go out and talk with business people. Ask them what problems they have. Basically, jot down all those problems, then go back, start doing some research and go, okay, I cannot solve that one. That one's too much of a pain in the ass. Oh, hey, that problem, websites. You need a website? Websites don't look too difficult. I'm going to start doing websites. And then you start building websites, and then you start talking to your clients, you start talking to people, say, hey, what additional things would you like in your website? They go, oh, if we had some kind of like customer database system, to be able to track communication, that would be cool. And I'm like, huh. And then you go back and like, how do you build a customer database? And then Google comes up, do you mean CRM? Click on what CRM is. Watch all this stuff about CRMs, customer relationship management software, and be like, oh, right. So you go back and forth. And so I talk with so many people, and it's like, yeah, it's great, right? So all you have to do is you have to go out and talk to all these people, figure out what their problems are, figure out what they're able to pay for things and all that kind of stuff, and then go back and get the knowledge, and then go back to them and offer services, right? Because again, for my generation, it was knowledge, the access to knowledge. But here's the weird, funny thing. Here's the weird, funny thing about my generation. And again, this is how generations are. Again, when there is a benefit, again, a lot of times people don't think about the modern worlds or for different time periods, how you have benefits and drawbacks. So the modern world, the benefit is you have Netflix, you have YouTube, you have Udemy, you have Udacity, you have Pluralsight, you have CBT Nuggets and INE and more things than I can count. Eli's the computer guys, right? You have all this stuff. But one of the interesting things is, back in the day, we didn't have access to all this stuff. And especially we didn't have access to it in our house. Like right now, when I want a book, I just go to my Kindle and I download a book. Like literally, I finished a book last night and I still wasn't tired enough to go to sleep. I was literally in my bed, finished a book, and went, I still want to read for a little while, and was able to buy a new book when I was laying in bed before I went to sleep. That's the modern world, right? The thing is, in the old days, you had to go out, right? So you had to go to Crown Books. And when you went to Crown Books, if you're trying to find a book or whatever you were looking for, you had to talk to the person working in the Crown Books. You had to talk to the person at Walden Books. You had to talk to the people at the library. You had to go and actually get things. I mean, think about that, right? We actually had to go and interact with the physical world. And when you went out there and you interacted with the physical world, then you just talked to people because you had to, right? When you talk about socializing, you talk with the kids nowadays, and like, oh, it's like back in the old, you just had to talk with people. Again, I'm an Aspie. It sucked back in the day, but you needed to get things done. If you wanted a comic book, if you wanted a specific comic book, you had to go talk to somebody in order to be able to get that comic book, right? You had to go out there. You had to interact with the world. You had to drive places. You had to go places. You had to be able to buy things and rent things and do all of this this interaction. And then when you sat there, then you'd actually be talking with people. So if you go to like Walden Books and you're talking about whatever subject matter, the person might say like, oh yeah, I'm actually learning that same subject area too. I'll tell you what, everybody says that this is the best book, but honestly, this is the book that I've been reading, and I really find it's a hell of a lot easier to understand than that thing, right? And you go through and you have this communication. Again, like the idea of like going to bars. Because again, one thing for my generation, again, this isn't too far ago. This isn't like so far ago. This is again like 2007, 2008. Like I remember when I would go to the bar at night, so many times I went to the bar at night because I was bored, right? My Indian buddy would be like, come to the bar. I don't want to go to the bar. But here's the thing. What else was I going to do? So I'm a young 20-something-year-old trying to build a business. Again, you go back to 2004, 2005, 2006. We did not have Netflix. We did not have YouTube. We did not have Kindles. We did not have video games the way that we do today. Basically, when I went home, I could sit and I could watch cable TV. I could read a book. And I could stare at a lot of walls, right? That's what That was actually what I had at home to do, right? I am not some paragon of virtue because I went to the bar. It's not like, yes, well, I was so cool. I was always going to the bar. No, okay, so your friend calls you up and says, "Hey, do you want to go to the bar?" And you're like, "No, not really, but I also don't want to be at home staring at walls." So fine, then you go to the bar, and then that's the thing. You go to the bar. When you go to the bar, you sit there, you start talking with somebody. "Hey, what do you do?" It's like, "Oh, I own a business." "Really? I'm doing tech support." So, out of curiosity, what kind of email services are you using in your business? "Oh, what we're using is blah blah blah." "Oh, really?" And then you can sit there and you can have that conversation. You sit down with another entrepreneur. "Hey, what do you do?" "Oh, I actually have a tech support company." "Really? You have a tech support company?" "I just built a tech support company." "Hey, you know what? What information are you willing to give?" Again, or even finding a wife. I literally, when I met my wife, to be clear, to be 100% clear, when I met my wife, I had zero interest in going to the bar that night. I did not want to go to the bar that night. I was irritated. I was annoyed that my friend, the only thing he could come up with is going to the bar. And I went, fine. And then if you know that story, I went to the bar and he ignored me. I wound up meeting my wife. I was so angry. I would go to the bar that night. He was literally ignoring me because he's trying to flirt with a lesbian, which is his own story. And I'm sitting there with a beer in my hand in the bar going, what the hell am I doing here? End up striking up a conversation with one woman who then invites me back to a table with a whole bunch of other people, which I then meet my wife. Bada boom, bada bing, it's 15 years later, and we have a house and dog and ponds and all that kind of stuff, right? But I think one of the interesting things for our generation, our age, was we had a profound lack of access to things like education and knowledge, but we had a massive access to human beings, like actual people to bounce ideas off of. The thought of sitting down and talking with another person and just bouncing random ideas off of them was just what you did. Was just what you did. Because, like, what else are you going to do? Again, like, you think about it. For me, like, when I was in high school and even, like, into college and all that, like, what video game systems did we have? Like, the Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, right? The Sega Genesis. Here's the thing about the Sega Genesis, right? I got good enough at the Sega Genesis, I would be beating games within one day. I would rent a game, I would bring it home, and within about 24 hours, I had already beaten the game. And that was it. That was it. There was no open world. There was no multiplayer mode. There was, you go, you blow up some things, you rescue the princess or whatever else, and then it's over. That's it. There is no, I guess you could do speed running or whatever after that, but like once you beat it, it's basically you play it a couple more times just so you know what's going on. Maybe try to, figure out a few tricks, but that's it. If you bought a $50 video game, you got a day out of it. That's it, right? It's not like this modern world where, again, you buy, I bought Red Dead Redemption, and again, I don't know how many hours, just hours and hours. Again, like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I beat Assassin's Creed Odyssey. 80 hours. 80, and there's still more to it. There is still so much more. I could be playing it for another 20 or 30 hours, right? And so, like, we didn't have access to that type of thing. So we had this thing called boredom, which we disliked. We disliked boredom. Boredom sucked, right? And so we had boredom and we had a lack of thing. And so we went out there and we had a much fuller social life because you had to. And again, you start thinking about it with modern relationships and you hear about things like incels, involuntary celibates for the men, right? Well, again, you think about it. You're a young guy, you're going out to find a book at the Walden Books. Walden Books are, Crown. They basically hire minimum wage people. Minimum wage people are generally other high schoolers. So you sit there, you're talking to the book. The person that you happen to be talking to about the book is a cute girl. And you have a conversation. You go somewhere else, person working, it's a cute girl, cute guy, whatever, you have a conversation, right? And so you go there and you have this communication, this way to bounce ideas off of people and to think about things and to get new ideas and all of that. We look at the new age. We look at this new age that so many of us are scared crapless of. And I think the thing is, like, we like to look and we like to laugh and we like to think about like these kids and these young people's, their failures or whatever. But it's the reality of this modern world, right? If you can go to your Kindle and buy a book, that's a profound benefit there. There's a profound benefit for knowledge there. But that means you don't have to leave the house, which means you don't even actually really need to get a driver's license. And then you definitely don't need to go to the local store. And then when you're at the local store, you don't have to ask somebody for help. And then if you don't have to ask somebody for help, you might not be meeting the cute girl or or the business person or something like that. Again, like I think about that when for me starting as a consultant. One of the best advices, but the best advice I ever got is I actually worked at the college bookstore. So the college bookstore I worked making like minimum wage, and this guy came through and he was buying, again, this was like 97 or something, and he was buying all these programming books. And I was just talking to him about buying programming books, and he said, yeah, he was starting a consulting company. I was like, oh, wow, how are you starting a programming consulting company? And he's like, well, I learned a little bit about programming, and then somebody was willing to pay me for that. And so then I did that, got paid, and basically put out my sign saying, hey, programming work available, or I'm willing to work. And like that was literally how he created his consulting company. But again, think about that. Think about that. I had to actually sit there and talk with the person, and how absurdly simple that idea is. Like how absurdly simple the concept of, hey, if you know enough that somebody is willing to pay you for that amount of information, then you take that money, see who else needs that amount of information, expand on your knowledge, and go from there, right? That's a couple of sentences. That's a paragraph of information. But I got that because I was working in the bookstore. And again, you think about working, like for my generation, in order to get things, anything, again, to get a book, to buy a book, to rent a video game. Again, right? Rent a video game, any of this kind of stuff, that you needed something like a car. In order to get something like a car, you needed a car, you needed car insurance, you needed gas, which means you had to get a job. And then you had a job, and then you were meeting people, and you were interacting with people, and then you were having stupid conversations. Think about all that social stuff that existed because of how bad our lives were. We had boring, miserable lives where we had to drive places to get books and talk with people. But you think about the modern age, all of this stuff is so available to folks. But then you think about what they've gained, and in that, then also what they've lost. They've lost those simple conversations over selling a couple of college books. They've lost the conversations when you go to the bookstore and you're trying to figure out which book you need, or what's the next book in the series, or what's the next trilogy in the series. They've lost that communication. They've lost the being bored. I mean, like, would I have met my wife? And this sounds weird. Would I have met my wife if I had had Netflix? If my friend had called up and said, hey man, let's go out to the bar. And I did not, to be clear, I did not want to go. When I say I did not want to go to the bar, that I'm not being melodramatic. I really did not want to go to the bar. I was just like, oh, I'm so tired of going to the bar. But again, what else? If I had had Netflix, and if I had said, oh, then, the next TV show, what is it? Warrior Nun. Oh, I'm just going to sit at home, grab a beer, and watch Warrior Nun. Would I be married now? Again, think about all the other communication knowledge. And so that's one of the things that I'm thinking about right now. And that's where I go when I start talking about like virtual parent. I don't know if it's virtual parent or virtual mentor, virtual wall bounce off of somebody. But the idea that in this new world, that one of the things that many people lack is simply another human being to talk to. Sounds weird, again, for my generation. What do you mean? What do you mean I talk with a lot? I talk with my neighbors, talk with my wife. I mean, right now, during the plague, it's driving me up the wall. To be clear, during the plague gets driving me up the wall. But you think about a lot of people just on the normal day-to-day basis. And so, again, one of the things you need to be thinking about is if you are a kid and you're going to be going to college, right? You probably have a couple of questions. You have a couple of questions that you just kind of want the answer to. Again, like, what's the difference between going to a community college for the first 2 years and then transferring to a 4-year program, or just going to a 4-year program entirely? Right? That's just a little conversation you can have. It's like, well, honestly, as long as your 4-year program, you have the name from that college you're going to, right? You can go to a community college for a fraction of the price. Again, actually get a pretty good education from that community college, transfer to the more expensive college, and that might actually save you a lot of money. right? Conversations about like, oh, Eli or somebody, I want to get into the tech field. I'm going to go to college. What degree should I get? Should I get a computer science degree or should I get an IT degree? Probably not. But again, and not even to have somebody give you an answer, not to have somebody say, you, boy, you need to get a computer science degree. But just to explain, okay, well, this is what a computer science degree is. This is what an IT degree is. This is what an IS is. This is why you may or may not want to get a specific, something like a cybersecurity degree. Just having a conversation. Or again, thinking about starting a business. Oh, I'm thinking about starting a business. Do I need to quit my day job? Again, a big thing. Like, I don't know. I want to do a startup company. I guess I'm going to have to quit my day job. No, no, don't quit your day job. No, motherfucker, no. Do your day job, which pays the bills and gives you health insurance during this time of plague and Great Depression. And then at night, build your startup company and see how it goes. Again, Bob Parsons, Bob Parsons who created GoDaddy? He spent 3 or 4 years doing his full-time day job and then building GoDaddy on the side. And now he's a gazillionaire. And the reason, right? And so just sitting there and just being able to have a conversation, being able to spitball things, being able to talk to somebody that's 20 years your senior and just get what their lay of the land is. Hey, when you see this new technology, or hey, when you see this going on, what do you think about this? Oh, that's cool. That new Raspberry Pi 4. I love my Raspberry Pi 4. Again, the coolest new things I have in technology in the past year is my Raspberry Pi 4, which is a $40 computer, and my iMac Pro, which is a lot more than $40. Those are the two computer devices I am just over the moon over, right? But you can sit there and you can talk. And you can just have a conversation in the ways that we used to have conversations. And so that's where I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about this whole idea. Again, not actually a virtual daddy. Not actually a virtual. I don't want to be your daddy. I don't want to be anybody's daddy. Woo, crikey, that sounds horrible. But again, like this idea of can you sell, like it's the idea of selling water. Again, for a lot of kids nowadays, selling bottled water probably seems very normal to you. No matter how absurd the concept of bottled water is to you, bottled water itself probably seems very normal to you. For me as a kid of the 80s, I remember when bottled water came out for the masses. I mean, they always had Perrier and that kind of stuff. But like when bottled water came out for the masses, I remember watching this show. It's called like Tech of Tomorrow. Something like that, right? There was a show in the late 80s and they talked about new technologies. And one of the things I remember them talking about is like the mass consumer bottled water. And I still remember it seeming like the stupidest thing, like the most ridiculous thing in the world. Why would you buy bottled water? There's a tap. So let me see here. So I can grab a glass and I can get water. Or I can go to the store, spend $1 for water, and get a bottle of water, and then have to figure out what the hell to do with the bottle. That seemed ridiculous. Again, like for any older people, do you remember the first time you saw mass consumer bottled water and how ridiculous the idea was? And now bottled water is like a $10 billion a year industry, and we're literally drowning the entire planet in plastic. Selling water now is so successful, we're killing our planet with it. Great, right? But that's a kind of thing like where something that was so just everywhere. So it was there. You just had water. Like, why would you buy bottled water? That's ridiculous. And now it's a massive thing. And that's one of the things I kind of wonder, like with relationships. Like not relationships. Again, I don't want to do relationships. I'm not your friend. I'm not your daddy. I'm not your mommy. I'm not your friend. But like communication and like actual two-party interaction. Have we gotten to a place where bottling that can actually be worth a tremendous amount of money? Again, for my generation, it seems, even for me, for a 40-year-old, it seems stupid. I'm sure for the older generations, it's just They were probably just laughing their ass off. What? You got to pay for a friend? In my day, in my day, we had to pay for sex. Holy crap! These millennials, they're just paying to talk to people nowadays. And it is funny. To be clear, it is funny. But is it true? Have we gotten to a time period where actually paying somebody to talk to is a valuable commodity? That's what I'm pondering. That's what I'm pondering. Because I see that with a lot of folks. I see that with a lot of my viewers. Is they don't have anybody to talk to. I literally sit there, like what I tell some of my viewers, what I tell some of the people that come to me. It seems like simple advice. Seems like the simplest advice in the world. It's like, well, go out and learn a little bit, figure out a couple things, go and talk with 5 people. 5 people, see what their ideas are, and then come back, rehash your idea, come back, go out and talk with another 5 people, refine your idea a little bit more, talk with another 5 people, kind of put some finishing touches, at least on the beta of your idea, and then go try to sell it to another 5 people. And they're like, how do I talk to 5 people? I don't have anybody to talk to. And you're like, what? Like, go to the bar, go to a cafe, go talk with somebody, go to a bar, buy a beer, look at the person to your left or look at the person to your right and go, hey, weather's hot today, or cold, or humid, or hey, do you know we won or lost that? Or hey, did you see how half the members of that baseball team died? I do have to say, a kind of like random conversation. Small talk nowadays might be a little depressing. You no longer, because they just came with topically. They just was it like the Marlins? Like half the Marlins team. Marlins is the baseball team. Literally half the Marlins team just came down with COVID. Oh, it's such a weird world we lived in. It used to be like, oh yeah, did you see how well the Marlins did yesterday? Or oh, you saw how badly the Marlins did yesterday? Now we're just like, oh hey, see half the Marlins team might like cough up a lung and die. Yeah. Oh, the world we live in. But anyways, I just go and you think about like, but for so many people like, oh, and so that's where I'm sitting back. And again, I've done back in the day, I did like 300. I did over 300 Skype meetings trying to do technical consulting, technical advice. But that's where I'm thinking more of if you open it up. If you open it up, like, hey, I'm about to graduate high school. What should I do next? Well, backpack through Europe. Or, should I join the military? Should I? Like these conversations, these things we just take for granted. You used to sit down with a cup of coffee or a beer and just, hey, yeah, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? But what if there's nobody to ask? What if you just sit there with a cup of coffee? What if you just sit there with a cup of coffee and a beer, and the only thing to talk to is a wall? That means there is an opportunity. That is what we call in the entrepreneurial world an opportunity. So anywho, some things to be thinking about in my long, convoluted ways. But this is the important thing, again, to be thinking about the modern world and to be thinking about where we're going. So I think we've really got to consider about where we are and what is actually valuable, and to get out of our heads, to get out of our prejudices. Again, what I find interesting is how many older people laugh at the millennials and laugh at the Gen Zers. Now, again, as a Gen Xer, I will laugh at the millennials and the Gen Zers simply because they're a generation behind me, and you just laugh at the younger kids, right? But there's something different. There's something profoundly different about how people are laughing in a very aggressive way. They're laughing in a very nasty way. They're laughing in a very derogatory way about the younger generations. And I think something to really be thinking about. Again, these younger generations aren't so young anymore. Again, millennials. So I'm 43, almost 44. So again, millennials are getting damn close to 40. They're getting damn close to 40. These aren't 16-year-olds anymore. They're damn close to 40. And so when 40-year, I mean, think about this for a second. We're in this weird world like, oh, the millennials. These millennials have 2 kids, a house, and a career. Like, when did we start laughing at people like that? But again, like one of the things we think about, instead of laughing and being derogatory, beyond just a little, all generations poke each other. But thinking about like, what are those actual problems? Like when I look at the younger people, like for me, I mean, I've had so many recessions, right? I apparently was born into a recession, and then we had Black Monday. Then we had Black Money in the late '80s, and then again, basically, I graduated into recession, and then we had the dot-com bust, and we had the Great Recession. Now we're going into whatever this depression is going to be. Right? And so you have a lot of younger people out there though. Like again, if you're in your 30s, you may not have even really remembered the Great Recession, right? Again, the Great Recession stopped supposedly in 2009. So depending on where you were in your career, you could have had 11 years. You could be a full-fledged adult who really has not seen the downside of the economy. Right? Because think about it, like if you started college in let's say 2005, you did your 4 years basically through the recession. If you came out, especially if you were lucky into an opportunity in 2009, you then sailed into, up. And so for you, like there's a lot of people out there that have never really had to think about the ramifications of a recession. And so there's a lot of, oh, ha, 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 these millennials or these Gen Zers, they just want, me. But then again, something to be thinking about. The world as it's been has helped create that kind of psychology. And so something to be considering is, okay, well, what happens when we have events like this? What are the needs for people? Again, don't be derogatory about it. Look at them as fully formed human beings that simply going into this new age might be a completely novel thing for them. So anywho, with that, I will call it a day, and I will see you all at the next video. Some things to think about. Selling friendship, not friendship. Selling conversation. Hey, I don't have the body for prostitution. But maybe I have the voice for selling communication. Something to ponder. See y'all later.